friends. We're now going to start some reminiscences of the International Model Car Builders Museum. As a preparatory matter, though, Dick Angar, who's our docent at the museum, has something to say briefly because he's got to depart. Dick?
Yes, we welcome as many of you want to come out to the museum on Saturday. I think there's 3 bus loads. First one leaves at noon. There's all sorts of interesting things to see there. My brother's helping me as the docent. So if you haven't come, you got to come see it. It's wonderful.
You have to go down and sign up, though.
Yeah.
If you have your own car, you can show up. But if you want to ride, you've got to go down and sign up on the
It's hard to
floor.
explain.
There's no charge to go ride, but you have to sign up.
Sandy, Utah.
Yeah, I know.
You take the 90th South exit and then head down to 7th West. You go until you see a bunch of kind of like evergreen trees and turn. You're better off to follow the buses.
Trust me, Sandy's a nutball place, so follow the bus.
I was just asking because I thought so.
Never done linkage.
Anyway, welcome here. As you know, there is an entity called the International Model Car Builders Museum. It exists in Sandy, Utah. It was first created in 1988 when I formed a Utah nonprofit corporation, and then we qualified ourselves with the Internal Revenue Service to be a 501c3 organization, which is all gibberish for saying that if you donate something, you get a tax deduction for it. If you donate something of kind value, but not dollar value, we have to have it appraised. But of course, we welcome and love money. That's a dollar for dollar deduction, and we issue tax certificates should you ever be audited. So please be generous. Give us kindly thoughts, and we have a great tour Saturday afternoon of the museum. You'll be, if those of you who haven't been there, you will be literally blown away. It's an old phrase, but honestly, there's some things there you will simply not believe. They're from the perspective of builders. We're not kit collectors, we're not part collectors, though there are some of those items. This is about people who contributed to the history of the museum and distinguished themselves through competition, through other achievements, and so forth. So please do sign up. Again, if you have a car and you can't get on a bus ride, follow one out. You're welcome to come. There's no charge to walk in the door. But do sign up to the registration form so we have a way of contacting you.
If you care to leave a couple $100 bills around, that's okay too. If you care to leave a couple $100 bills laying around, that's okay too.
I want to introduce Dale Horner over here. He's the exchequer. He's in charge of the monies. He raises money for us, and he's been instrumental as a trustee of the museum. I don't know what we'd do, frankly, without him. He's been really great. To my right is my esteemed wife, who has been with the museum since day one. Her name is Janet, and she has managed to tolerate me for now coming in almost 50 years, which is, yeah.
That's who we need to give the $100 to.
I can honestly tell you, without her help, both in terms of files and administration tasks and so forth, neither the museum or GSL would have ever existed, and that's the absolute gospel truth. I can't possibly do all of it. I'm not smart enough to do some of it, but she is. So I want to give you formal appreciation and tip of the hat for that, because these exist because of her administrative skills. She'll talk to you in a minute about her particular duties at GSL. I started GSL in probably about 1980. I started the museum at GSL because people were coming up to me in the mid-'80s and saying, we have a collection of old Revell parts packs or Monty upholstery kits, or we have this old model we found in some swap meet or whatever. I don't want it, do you? Why do I want it? I mean, I had no thought of this to begin with. And this stuff just started to accumulate. It went on for years, and so we threw up a wall in my garage and we put shelves up there and started to put parts in the bins. You may remember that. And she made lists of things we had, and the word got out. I don't know how it got out, frankly, but it did. And suddenly people were coming up to me at GSL and in response to my columns in Scale Auto and saying, we want to give donations to you and so forth. And so, okay, Jim Keeter came to me about that time in '88 and said that he wanted to sell many of his personal artifacts, which were both competitively oriented and mostly for the museum. And so I, with her permission, cheerfully bought them. And we then started cataloging. That's how we got the Dodge Fever models, for instance. We got a lot of other stuff from him too. And then the word got out, and the word just tended to snowball and snowball and snowball. Our first room for the museum was about an 80 square foot tiny hole in the hall by my law office near the Salt Lake Capitol, like $70 a month or something, but had a phone line. I bought a couple of derelict glass display cases, and we started to put things in there. Augie's Condo donated a few items. Guys that came to GSL were tossing things our way, and I was hoping that, didn't know what I was hoping for at that point, except that I sensed that there was something going on. So I talked to Tim Boyd, we got his blessing for it, and the support of others, and suddenly I did the legal work and we were on our way. We moved, our second place was down in a room in downtown Salt Lake City. It was an old apartment, pretty cheesy apartment, and it was maybe 225 square feet. Alan Rabb got involved with us at that point and donated some wall-mounted display cases, and the word got out, and suddenly stuff started coming in. It just kind of ballooned and pirouetted on itself. And when we outgrew that space, we moved to our present location in Sandy, Utah, which is about 1,200 square feet. We've been there for 20 years, and we have vastly outgrown the space. We have decided not to move because I don't know how many thousands of people it would take to move everything, and we don't have the money to move. And I've not wanted to spend more in rent than we are spending presently, and the rent was just raised, and we'll talk about the financial issues here in a few minutes. But the bottom line is that this is a serious collection, it's a permanent collection. We are legally established, satisfied with the IRS requirements, state of Utah requirements, which are almost worse than those of the IRS. And we have a somewhat diverse group of supporters, including Dale Horner and others who are presently signed up to assist us with fundraising and program management and so forth. Because of COVID, we have fallen down. Yeah, this one here. We have had a program called the Hall of Fame, which was divided into people who have contributed as magazine writers or builders, or as persons who have participated in model building from a commercial or professional standpoint. We have let this program lapse for the last 3 years. That is soon to be corrected. These plaques are produced locally, and they will. Looks like we're going to have to supplement with the third document, but we will name these people who have been approved by a group of advisors of ours, and we'll publish that information on the soon-to-be updated website. There's a lot going on, and I don't know quite how to talk about all of it because there are some real opportunities, there are some real risks involved for the museum right now, and I thought this was a good place for us to collectively talk about them and discuss them. Currently, when we first moved into this place in Sandy, it took us, there were maybe 10 or 12 people with trucks, and we moved everything, including the Oakland Roasters diorama, from the Salt Lake location down a flight of stairs and transported it out to Sandy. You'll see that if you go out on the tour. We moved other stuff out there too. And we were paying, I think, about $550 with rent 18 years ago. It's a good landlord, good guy to work with. Then it was raised to $775, which is about 20% lower than the adjacent rooms. This is a commercial establishment with small offices and a larger building. And he recently raised the rent again because property taxes in Salt Lake County have climbed to the roof. Currently, the new rent is $1,100 a month for 1,200 square feet. We've been faced with the dilemma. Dale and I and others have talked about it. Do we move? Where can we get equivalent or better space for less money? How do we amortize the cost of moving? There are costs to picking things up and reorganizing them and moving whatever distance. There are manpower costs. Who do you get to do the work? They will be careful enough to move things of priceless quality. about 2 years ago, we started a building fund, if you will, 3.5 years ago. And we have solicited monies to be deposited into this fund, which we hope one day will produce enough money we can buy our own building. That's part of the game. We have to have monies to run the building. We have to buy it, then you have to maintain it, have to pay utilities on it and so forth. So we've got that whole group of issues that have to be dealt with. Then we have to talk about, well, who administers it? I've been encouraged by a lot of people to download what's in here. I have a strong institutional memory. I don't want that to die with me and end up in some sort of, afterlife junkyard. So that has to be memorialized in catalogs so it's not lost. But then who takes over the administration of the museum? We have to have dedicated people who are willing to set aside their own interests, financial as well as personal, to administer, to have the vision to run the museum. I'm not saying we're the only ones, it's clearly not. But there has to be a cadre of people who want to do it for reasons other than public fame or accolade. It's got to be a dedication and a commitment to the purposes of the museum, which is literally to preserve the history of our hobby from the point of view of the builder. Talk about contest winners and achievements in scale, craftsmanship, and detail, and all of that. Those are big issues we have to talk about. What do we do about rent? This is now $1,100 a month. We have no choice right now except to pay it, which we're able to do because of Dale Horner's abilities to raise money. We have a general fund, we have a building fund. The general fund is the one where monthly donors contribute money, go into the account, and I cut a check once a month. Janet does the envelopes, I cut the check and write a check to the landlord, who's a good guy. He's been very helpful. He just put a brand new furnace and forced air conditioning into our place. The other one broke, it was miserable to be there, but now it's not. He's very sensitive to what he used to be a builder himself, and he not only delayed the increase in rent, but we're paying less than the adjacent space by about $75, $80 a month. So I can't get mad at him, but we are faced with the reality of 12 times $1,100. That's to keep the doors open. It is not to pay utilities. It is simply to maintain a space, and it's a good space. It's a good solid space, a safe space. We don't publicize the location of it because these days, who knows, we have a mail drop and that's where all the mail goes. The place you're going to go to does not have a publicized address. So what do we do about all of that? We'll talk about more of that in a few minutes, but I want to give you an overview of the legal and financial realities of running a museum like this. There have to be people to replace those currently in charge, those currently who are responsible for the preservation and organization of the museum. Now, one of the ways of doing that, of course, is to seek, as we have very successfully, I can tell you, to seek donations from estates and from people who have caught the vision of the museum and so forth. I'm happy to announce today, and I'll call up front to Derek Kalin-Keck, who on behalf of Andy and Renee Callan has a major...
Drew Kalin-Keck.
I'm sorry, excuse me, who has a major donation to make to the museum's building fund. So would you please come up, Drew?
Yeah. Also, because I'm doing this for my dad.
All right.
I got the hat. I'm excited to run it,
So hi guys, oops. A couple of you might know me, but most of you don't. My dad was Andy Kalin. He used to, big builder. He passed away 16 years ago, I think, something like that. And a lot of you know him. And of course, you knew Renee, who was here every year helping out and stuff. Unfortunately, she passed away like a year and a half ago. And so we, luckily, my father and Renee had my brother and myself both who, we don't collect model cars, but we collect other things. And so we understand the importance of a collection, the history of such things, So unlike, somebody who might just go, oh, it's a bunch of junk. We definitely wanted to make sure that we took care of the models, Dad's collection, his workroom, which nobody really been in much in the 15 years since then. Renee and I got to talk before she passed away about the whole thing, and it was in the will that a portion of the proceeds from the sale of the cars and stuff go to the Model Car Museum, which I assure you we would have done anyways, you know. Luckily, I had Dan Baker to help out a lot with that, and several guys from the Phoenix group down there. Dan and Mike especially were very helpful to me. Because I sell board games for a living, so I understand collectible stuff. Model cars were a whole different aspect of things to me, trying to figure out valuations and how much people are willing to spend. And things like tire burn, which is not something I even knew anything about until I am now more familiar with, having looked through several old kits. Anyway, so we did a couple of private sales. We did some sales at one of the conventions down there, and finally sold the rest as a, sort of a silent auction type of thing, and raised quite a lot of money. So I am happy to announce that we are donating $11,148 to the museum. So, do this properly. So, yes.
Can't get the antlers in.
Take your pictures, guys.
I wonder if my bank will accept it.
Alright, cool. Also, we are donating the hat. We're donating the hat as well. So, Kristen, can you bring up the thingy? Oh, we get a little thing that's been
The
in.
moose hat, as you know, has been a staple of GSL for a lot of years.
Yes, here.
The moose hat's been a staple of the museum for a lot of years, and is the subject of a major award, which will culminate this year.
The hat gets a
So,
case of its own.
Thank you,
the
Christine.
hat, I don't know where you want that.
Right here. We're good.
And then I know, producer Dan brought a bunch of stuff. I think some of them is my dad's cars, some of my dad's cars as well. So there's also several of dad's cars that we thought would be good to go in the museum as well. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah. Thanks,
Much
guys.
appreciated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Along that same line, there are several of Moose's built models that are in the auction for tomorrow night. So if you're interested, be sure and show up. Pay a lot of money for them. They're good stuff.
Dan Baker is also here with other donations from the estate. Dan, would you, can't quite see where you are right now, would you come up, please? Dan was nice enough to send me a bunch of photographs of some of Andy's work, and I was happy and honored to select some of them for permanent display in the museum itself.
He was the go-between.
That's yours.
He was in the hospital.
Thank you. My wife Lois and I were very dear friends of Andy and Renee, and many years ago, Andy asked me to look after the administration of his collection upon his death, and to help Renee with what he termed her retirement fund. His collection was the focus of a lot of attention amongst modelers. He had an amazing collection. It took us months to, after Renee passed, and she also asked me to help Drew and Rick with disposition of the model collection, with the specification that 1/3 of the proceeds would be donated to the museum, which was a very passionate interest of both Andy and Renee. So I was incredibly honored. It was a lot of work, but we managed to turn it to good things, and we were very proud to be a part of this contribution. There's two other aspects of it, and as Mark mentioned, Andy built over the years a lot of remarkable models. In addition to his zany antics at GSL, he was an excellent modeler, superb modeler. One of his most iconic models was a cover model on one of those magazines that used to exist, and unfortunately, Mark and I talked about this one particular car because of all of Andy's creations. It was the one I most wanted, should that day come. And unfortunately, it went to Australia and won a national contest in Australia and never came back. So I've got a blow up of a magazine cover that I can look at fondly from time to time to see Andy's 51 Chevy. However, he also had a lot of other great models, and Mark selected a handful to be donated to the museum for permanent display, and I'll quickly show you some of those, but they'll be available for viewing during this weekend, certainly Saturday at the museum. And then in addition to that, we have brought close to a dozen models that Andy built for the auction. And as mentioned, you'll want to see those. I'm not going to drag everything out right now, but trust me, we brought a lot of models. There's a couple also that were not earmarked for the museum. They weren't included in the auction because everything selected for the auction was 1/25th scale. But I brought them along. One of Andy's most iconic was this large-scale Camaro, and you need to see the paint job, because Andy created this paint job by masking off some panels and burning plastic sprue with a Bic lighter to create oily, inky smoke, which he maneuvered the car around in the smoke to get this really interesting pattern on the panels. So this was one of his, and this was in an era when the aftermarket wasn't as prolific as it is now. Another of Andy's large-scale creations was this Grumpy's Toy. And the thing that's special about this is all of these graphics, there were no aftermarket availabilities of Grumpy's Toy graphics in this scale. Andy created all of them on a computer and then printed them off as decals. I'm going to take a moment to say one thing too. One of the vehicles that Andy built that isn't here is one that my wife and he collaborated on. Believe it or not, when I was a young fellow, I was a disc jockey, and I converted my newly gained fortune to purchase a brand new Stealth Z28 Camaro in 1969. And over the years, it was lost to the time, but I always loved that car. And my wife, Lois, before she passed many years ago, found one 110 in Kodak Instamatic picture of me and the car. And from that, she commissioned Andy. She got him enthusiastic about this project. He went out and found a 1/18 scale die-cast Camaro, which he stripped and painted in the special color that I had ordered, frost green, and he made this die-cast into a perfect replica of my old Camaro, which I owned new in '69. And that one did not come here today for show because it has such a special place in my collection. It doesn't leave the house. And I bought an alarm system. Another of Andy's models that's over here for you to take a look at is a large-scale Chevy pickup that he designed graphics in a patriotic theme, and it was always an eye-catcher. So those are some of his built-ups. Now, the auction is going to feature some models you'll see later, But for the museum, one of Andy's and Mark's favorites was an If I Had Designed It model that he built for the GSL contest, where he converted a four-door Crown Vic into a two-door Crown Vic in the old 50s style. And it's really a remarkable model. It's quite an eye-catcher. When I contacted Mark and said, there's a lot of Andy's models that would probably be good selections for the museum, this one and one other were the first two he specified he wanted for the museum. So along with a couple others that I brought, that one is for the museum. And I'll get through these quickly, but excuse me, I know better than to breathe heavily into a microphone. One that Andy created was an El Camino treatment of a 67 Nova. And it's a beautiful little model, well executed with great styling cues. You don't see too many of those. Another model of Andy's that went on to fame as a cover car on a magazine for the hobby was this 1965 El Camino Custom with a very beautifully executed orange fade paint job. And if you're as old as I am, you probably remember seeing this on the cover of a magazine. By the way, my dear friend Mark is doing an excellent job as a Vanna stand-in. I considered the If I Had Designed It selection as a kind of a twofer, because Mark didn't remember this one, but I did, and I thought it should go with the Crown Vic. It's a very nice treatment of the Impala SS four-door sedan that he converted to a sport coupe. And finally, last but not least, all of this used to be easier when I was younger. Last but not least is a really unusual model, the Thunder Chicken. And that is a highly stylized Dodge Charger of the first generation. Now somewhere in the midst of everything for the auction, you're going to see some pretty interesting models from Andy's workbench, including one of the original Hero Imperial convertible with all of the cowboy accessories. And we also brought along a handful of others, the large scales. So we want you to just keep Andy the Moose in mind. He was a character, no question about it. And he loved GSL, he loved the museum, and we're only too proud to make sure that a large portion of his legacy lives on.
As it will. All right. I'd like to turn the time to Dale then, and to my wife, who maintains Janet maintains a very significant part of the museum's collection. talk about something.
As you know, the museum is always in need of funds. I don't know any museum in the country that, very few of them are not in need of funds. We cannot, with the present donations we have, do not even cover the expense of just the rent. We have many ways to donate, one of which some became familiar with last time, which was Amazon Smile, which is no longer a program. That was of a small benefit in the past, and we were very appreciative of that. We have the ability to donate via PayPal. The museum has its own email address. So if you are on PayPal using your own email address and our email address, it goes directly to PayPal. We also have a method where you can donate on a regular basis or a one-time basis directly from your bank account to our bank account. We prefer, for obvious reasons, that this be a monthly donation and it's bi-monthly, annual, whatever it is that works. Very easy to do, very easy to set up. I have all that information right here, including the builder's museum address, email address, the mailing address. If you choose just to write a check and mail it to us, that's fine too. And also have the bank information for you to send it directly to the bank.
Are you getting a lot of donations through the bank?
No.
No,
Is that,
I would say maybe 3 or 4, that's about all.
Couple $100 a month.
Yeah.
well, no, I wouldn't talk, so you're getting, because I was doing that and all of a sudden it went south. Remember, we were trying to work to solve
I
that.
remember that.
Yeah, so.
Supposedly, this is some fellows that have signed up for it, I'll say within the last year, they've not had a problem. It's worked pretty well. So the only thing is, I have a plethora of these slips, which I'd be happy to hand you, take it with you. The only thing I ask, because it has banking information on it, which is very specific and it could be misused, keep this close to you. And if you decide to do this, we'd be greatly appreciated.
How short are you don't just talk rent, how short each month are you?
Well, right now, close to $500, which is significant.
There are a couple of donors we can turn to from time to time, make more than the regular $50 a month donations, but you can't go to that well very often. And
Yeah.
so, I call them up and I spend a good deal of my time on the phone, begging for money. I mean, Jan and I contributed our substantial sums, but we're not the panacea either. It has to be a more broadly shared support base than just a couple of few people.
NNL or the GSL in 2019, we were discussing this, and you hadn't established PayPal at that time. How many people are you getting a lot of donations through PayPal?
No.
Because I know a lot of people were saying, well, do PayPal. We'll
We
donate.
only have one that I know that is consistent. There's one other is now and then. They're gifts from the heart, so you can't really say, come on, offer us some more.
Most donations we get are checks, are checks we get every month. Either direct debits from a donor's account or a check they've written out. And it has been,
You're gonna say-
Thank you, Briar.
let me tell you something about Brother Passerino. He does this. May I show this, Briar? May I show this?
What's that?
May I show this?
Do whatever you want to do.
$500 here. Plus a donation of an auto world hinge kit. Thank you, Briar. It's a source of unending diversity. Look, the bottom line is this. We have a small audience of donors who are faithful, contribute regularly, but the amount of money, if you graph it, goes up and down every month. Because of Janet's excellent money management, we can saw the tops off and fill in the valleys, but there are times it doesn't cover it. And so either she and I have donated to it, or I've turned to a couple of donors who seem to be both inclined and able to do so. Now, everybody who makes the donation is on a list and they get a monthly newsletter, which is sort of an insider's view of recent acquisitions and what's going on and so forth. That sporadically goes out about every 6 weeks. But that at least gives people who contribute to keep the doors open some view of it. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that the monies we're talking about they are not used to improve exhibits. Those monies are not used to create programs where we can reach out to the public. It's just to keep the doors open. You know, the rent, Janet and I have been paying utilities there for years, and that's fine. I'm not making any point about that, except to say that just keeps the doors open, and that's, of course, the biggest deal. When you see the collection, if you haven't, you'll understand why that's an enormous achievement. But we need help, and we need not only your help, but others who may be inclined to participate with you. It's a significant collection of the history of those in our hobby who have made such a difference, people like you and me. And I want this to sound as emotional as I can get it. There are times I've been down there, and I'm not one to say such things easily, but I've been down there at night, putting things away, wiping down a countertop or whatever, and I'm telling you, when I go by some of the cabins, especially the one with Augie Escano, it's really weird, the Rebel Pactor contest, it's almost like the room is haunted. I don't mean that literally, of course, that's silly. But there's a sense of things there that you can't appreciate unless you've been there. And it's moving. I mean, I've had tears in my eyes walking by some of that, at times, not all the time, but at times. And it's that kind of an objective and an expectation that I think we need more people to share. We have really good long-term goals now of scanning. We've scanned a lot of magazines. Our Scan the Past program. We've been relatively successful with the Clone the Past program, where specific high impact models have been replicated. The Clone the Past, the Scan the Past stuff will be uploaded to the new website that Mark Bend is working on. Is Dave Best here in the room? Dave Best and I will be working on the website to update it. It'll be a searchable database. Because obviously we understand not many people actually get to Utah, but we can make it available worldwide, of course, with the technologies in a WordPress environment. But there's a natural limit to what we can do, and we don't mind doing the work if there's the sense of financial support that we have backstop. So we would petition for that, please.
Mark, have you considered approaching corporate, Rebel or?
Oh, yeah.
And what happens there?
The same thing happened this year. I'll tell you what happens. In the past GSL, since we were at the Airport Hilton, which is 18 years ago, major kit manufacturers have donated the commemorative kit. Not one would touch it this year, and I know these people. I had phones hung up on me. These are people I know. And they just said sorry and hung the phone up there. It's a nice idea, and I wish the Germans now who own the Rebel company would sense our dilemma and our perspective. I don't really expect that, but they now own most of the tooling. Be great if round two sensed that, but they've got their own perspectives, and I don't fault those, but they don't include even donating commemorative kits. That's the reason you don't see one here the first time in almost 20 years. And we can't afford to buy them. These even wholesale, we can't afford to buy those. So we want to do that. Now, let me just make one point with you. Go ahead.
Have you approached any government entities?
And that's an interesting point. About 2 years ago, a woman named Laura Fisher got a hold of me. She's the chief archivist for the museum, the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Los Angeles. And she said, we have a guy that's coming here and wants to donate a lot of money, a lot of models to the Peterson Museum, and we're not interested. But she said, I did a web internet search and I found you guys. Are you interested? So we made car contacts, and was it your brother that brought the stuff up?
My son.
Your son. Gail's son stopped by the survivor's home and picked up huge pickup load full of stuff. I mean, unbuilt kits that are built. I mean, it's an enormous collection, including a lot of printed magazines we didn't have. In the course of doing that, though, I talked to her at length. I've never met her, but she's a very nice person. She spearheaded the effort at Peterson Museum to secure about $1.5 million from General Motors to underwrite their effort to save almost a million and a quarter vintage negatives, which were deteriorating. As you know about celluloid, it deteriorates. And they scanned 1.5 million negatives with this multi-dollar investment grant from General Motors, and now it's all online. And I've used some of those in my forthcoming predictive book. They're incredible images, but that all comes out of this effort. So as Laura and I developed our professional relationship, I said, look, are you willing to help us? And she said, I'd love to oversee your application for corporate funding. We've got at the museum the only surviving bits and pieces of a 1/4-inch Chevy 283 kit, the program that Revell proposed to General Motors in 1956. General Motors shipped a 283 or 265, I guess, out to some machine shop in the West Coast, and they sliced it into 1-inch sections. Imagine the bandsaw that did that. And they made a kit of it, 1/4 scale. And they used beryllium. I think Keeler told me they used beryllium, which produces great images but doesn't last worth a darn. They produced 4 or 5 sets of parts. They put parts up on this one big board, collapsing and taking an airplane. We have that board, and it's 99% complete. We have the copy that Revell used of the leather-bound volume that contained the proposal to give to General Motors. They went back there hat in hand and made the proposal, and General Motors turned it down. We acquired that about 10 years ago, including enough parts to assemble 2 engines. We have, to our knowledge, the only such parts that survive on Earth. You can see them in the museum. It's an amazing piece of work. That's a sidebar. Laura Fisher says that General Motors would be, in her view, would be potentially interested in a program that would, some sort of grant that would underwrite historical perspective on that. Jim Keeters told me the only couple of people left on Earth that are still alive that know about it. I'll be interviewing, one of us will be interviewing them in the next 6 months to get them on film and or on just, videotape. Maybe we'll turn the muse loose on it and let them do it. But if we can do that, then we can preserve not only that history, but get General Motors involved. And if we get that kind of a donation, we'd have a building in a jiff. It wouldn't be a problem at all, but it's going to take a lot of work. She's willing to help us. Her name is Laura Fisher, and she's terrific. I mean, I think very highly of her. But that's going to take work. You see, someone's got to interface with her, and I'm willing to do that. But in the meantime, we've got to keep the doors open. And that's the conundrum. You've got to get there, you've got to get past where you are. Who knows whether that application will be successful? It could be turned down cold.
Have you thought of moving the museum to someplace like the Ford Museum or Barber?
That's an interesting point.
Peterson?
Peterson's not interested.
No.
Not at all. Turn down flat. Laura told me that. She said, don't even try. They would take one model from this guy, donate the stuff, put it on display. Not one. There were dozens, maybe hundreds. There is a remote possibility. Let me tell you, a guy by the name of Clay Smith, who runs
Museum of Speed. Museum of Speed.
in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yes.
It's a big museum.
It's a Smith Museum.
Okay, they have race cars, and they recently, about 2 years ago, Darryl Starber's wife Donna died. They think of COVID, and his museum had to close. They had a custom car museum someplace out in the boonies, in the middle of wherever. Yeah, sort of. This was so far in the boonies, I'm not even sure it's on this planet. But it was a great museum, but he had several hundred cars there of leading custom car builders around the country, including all of his. He had worked out an arrangement with Clay Smith that upon his passing, or his desire to close his museum, that Clay Smith would acquire that collection. They have. Clay Smith of the museum now owns all of Starber's cars, including the Predicted, which is my obsession in my life. Ask my wife. In fact, I've been their consultant. I wrote all the text for their signage for it. and we'll have to have more involvement with them. But there have been he called me, Clay Smith and his wife called me maybe a year, 10 months ago, and said, can we have lunch with you? I know Clay Smith wasn't anybody, I knew the name, but I didn't know him. Took him to lunch, and we talked about a lot of subjects. And we touched, but I do mean only touched, on the question of whether that museum would be a host for our model car museum. It didn't get there was hostility for it, but he was just in a time frame, and we didn't talk much about it. That's one option for us, and it's a viable option. They have a lot of money, and they have a lot of professional staff back there. They have a whole staff that does nothing but rescue photographs and take them. I mean, it's a remarkable place. That's one possibility. Others have made proposals for us to move the museum. We have had proposals to move the museum since the mid-90s, but none of them have ever had this sort of, not that it couldn't occur, but we've not had the kind of proposal that would lead trustees to think that to date, not speaking of the future, that would have enough administrative support or financial ability to carry it on.
But you're open to that?
To a proper proposal, but it would take a well-written proposal. I'm inclined, and this is what I want to talk to you about. I think this ought to be a matter of public discussion. What do you think? What do you think of me exploring that with the Speed Museum? Is there a sense that we now to do that? Remember, it won't be just our museum. We'll be a part of we would be a part of a much larger organization. We would maintain control over the initial design of it, but ultimately, we lose ownership of it. Ultimately, it becomes their stuff, just like the Starburst stuff has become theirs. So any notion that our perspective on that would be respected forever is probably not a good one. Not to say I'm hostile to it, nor are they hostile to us. We seem to be really wonderful people, but big car people are not small car people.
Won't stop.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. So, the question, yeah.
So you're saying you need about 1,200 feet? Is that like minimum?
That's all we have now.
That's what you have
And
now.
we're way overstuffed. We need closer to 2,000.
If you're going to investigate moving, and what type of a staff of volunteers would need to be available?
Locally?
Yeah, as docents, and what,
Maybe
if
four
you were
foot.
to move to a different location, like currently, I guess, what's it taking for a staff, other than administrators or directors, but just because you're gonna have, if you had to rely on some people to come in, dust and everything.
My law clerk comes in and does the vacuums. He's a good guy, he's respectful. Other people from the local club come in, and there are a couple of people like David King who are just tremendous.
So if you had an active model community around where you were to move to depend on.
But it would have to be a community, not only active people, but possessing the perspective of preserving the collection and for the purposes it's been preserved. It can't just be shove stuff on a shelf and, oh gee whiz, look at that. There's got to be something about developing cultural perspectives about it and honoring those people who contributed. We've got two models there that were from 1950, 51 that were carved in, I think, balsa by an F-86 pilot fighting in the Korean War. They were donated by his grandson 22 years ago. He was shot down by the North Koreans. Didn't make it, but we've got his models. We got two of his models. They're sitting up on the shelf. And are they like GSL stuff? Not on a bet. But tell me something more significant. And that's the kind of thing we have, not just that thing, but that's the kind of thing we're after, to honor that guy. The Jim Keeler collection, the Augie Scanos, the Steve Catrins, and we have some Steve Catrin stuff there. That's what we're after. And that's the perspective that I would only agree to release if there were people that persuaded us and others could actually carry that out. And to give you another perspective on that, let me tell you what my wife does in maintaining 3 4-drawer filing cabinets of memorabilia.
Well, I don't like to talk in front of groups, but I just wanted to say this. First of all, I wanted to mention that there are a lot of local people who help, and Gail has come from afar several times to just spend a week and work in the museum, so we really appreciate that. And the Hadleys work in the library and keep it up to speed.
Oh, and the library, wait till you see what they've done. Wait till you see, I'm gonna interdict here for a second. They have brought order from chaos that cannot be explained. They've got boxes with titles on them. Our policy is to have 2 copies of every issue, 2 of the best copies, and we sell the 3rd. So when we get a new copy, if it's better, we keep it and sell the 3rd. But they have arranged that library, wait till you see it. There are thousands of issues in there, some magazines going back into the 30s. Dave Cummins just gave us a copy of a model car magazine out of London. Remember, just after the war in 1948, they're building model cars again. That, I should have mentioned that earlier, but that library is stunning. It's just incredible.
So we appreciate all they do. And then we have a man named Chad Smith, who comes and helps us, and Paul Bringhurst does, and Nashayla Lyons, and others. I'm probably forgetting people, local people. So to your point about our local people coming and stepping up, they are, and they help a lot. So we really appreciate that. And then, but we miss Phil Gladstone, because he would conduct tours, and he just kind of kept a finger on everything that was happening. So we've had a big loss, in the past years with him. But, and I just wanted to say too, that on the finances, I see the checks come in, and I take them to the bank. It's so old fashioned, and they get such a kick out of it. What is this, the Model Car Museum, and National this and that? And I just say, yes, this is so cool. And some of these people who contribute each month just contribute $25, and they have it set up with kind of it's a printed check. They don't write it themselves, their bank prints the check, but they put it in an envelope and mail it to us, and it goes through like a charm every time. So anyway, that's kind of fun to put the $25 donation is, I think, really neat. And then about the inventory, I kind of have a mind for detail, and I kind of like to keyboard, and so I can kind of do this. I've done this for years, but we just keep an inventory of all the models, and so it's important to have them on the shelf and everything, but it's good to have a written accounting of everything that we have in there. We need to keep it up to date all the time. And then we have the same thing with these filing cabinets. You'll see them when you go there on Saturday, where they have, there's just a big correspondence section where Mark has kept track of all these letters with all these people over the years. I'm sure he's got a letter in there from each one of you, in this section. And then there's a section for model clubs, where we've kept their newsletters and certain things that they've done that are interesting.
Tanya, who's arranged that, we've got a whole section on major clubs that have newsletters,
Yeah.
which have now largely disappeared and gone online. We used to get paper copies, now we get email copies.
And then we have just a general history section, and we have things in there, just nifty little advertisements and cool, things that, what do you do, order them on eBay, or what, just things that we want to remember, and then they're all organized under monogram or Revell and so on, and just all kinds of really cool things. Dale has become really good at figuring all that out and helping us to keep these up to speed. But, and then there's a section where we keep track of all the GSL. So you can look at some of that when you come tomorrow, anyway, or Saturday. Okay, that's it.
We have things in the filing cabinets like A&T's lacquer program in the early 60s, including a flyer from this 1962 Seattle World's Fair advertising A&T's custom lacquer spray cans. I know that sounds really weird, but if you saw it, it's really cool. And we probably have 1,000 things in those four or five drawers. They're all organized subject matter, but then chrono, or then alpha. It's an astonishing collection. Don't show it to me, show it to them.
Mark?
Alphabetizing.
Mark? I'd like to actually donate something to you for the museum that I discussed with you.
Please do, please come up here.
You're talking about flyers and things.
Yes, please.
I found these items in a collection I bought a couple of years ago, and I thought this would be a perfect place for it. What they are, a couple items in here. One is an AMT Corporation card, like how you've seen, and this is an Auto World license plate thing. I don't speak well up in front of people, sorry. I don't speak well in front of people well. These were a couple of monogram newsletters from the around 62. And this is the 1963 Autorama car contest judging sheet that I found in one of the kits I was donating. Additionally, I found a couple of entry forms for the first National Revell Model Car Hactra Contest, unused. And the final thing I found, I want to donate. This is the first Revell National Hactra advertisement. I found it in excellent condition, and I thought the museum could use it.
And the back of it has all the rules.
It has all the rules on the back. But I discussed this a couple of months ago with Mark, and he said he would love to have it.
Thank you very much.
Long line of donations. There's a local fellow here. Mind if I stand up? A local fellow here named Brian Deese, who's been a member and well-known in this area. Not in good health. There was a large amount of model kits, model parts, pieces that were donated to the museum. There was I think 2 or 3 cabinets that were mixed of photo etch parts, pieces, stuff, things. It was just a conglomeration of stuff. Mark mailed it to me to sort through it for the auction. After going through this stuff and looking at it, seeing what it was, there was no way to really sort this into grab bags to sell for any amount of money or to do anything else. So I made a command decision without talking to the king to break this up into 3 different categories and sell it at toy shows that we participate in the East Coast. My guess is that the maximum this would have raised at auction might have been $100 in the aggregate of it. So far, I have about 1/3 of it left, and I believe to date I have sent checks for about $750 to the museum. So I'd like to thank the Deese family right now for donating that. While we're on this, I'll use my time. We have 3 models over here, which came from a fellow that was a personal friend of mine by the name of John White. Not the John White from Indiana. This is the John White from New Jersey, which many of you knew from the N&Ls in New Jersey. John was an absolute Chevrolet nut. He belonged to the Vintage Chevrolet Club. He had 2 vintage Chevrolets, 48 sedan, similar to this, black, very simple. That sedan was featured in the movie. He was a tremendous model builder. These are 3 models of his. John passed away probably 2 years ago now, about this time. Not from COVID. He died of a heart attack, went into a coma, never recovered. It was rather tragic, but it woke a lot of people up in the area, many of us friends, to realize that we had nothing, no provision made for something happened to us. John had this 48 Chevy, as I mentioned. He also had a 54 2-door hardtop, which was a Hershey Senior winner. Absolutely drop-dead gorgeous car. He had probably 1,000 built models, probably 2,000 unbuilt models. The tragic part of this is he had no will. every single piece of that, except these three that I know of, the state of New Jersey benefited from it. He also had a huge vintage Levi collection, which was probably worth as much as the cars were. So the case is that take care of yourself, take care of your family, make it easy. Don't give it to the state, they got enough money. Do your own. These three cars were selected, and they were high graded out of his collection by his goddaughter. They sustained a minor amount of damage in the handling of them, but they're significant to me, and I think to the museum, in that they're rather unique. The photos verify what these are. This was a car that was a noted car for Chevrolet, which they built and identified, which has had the identity on it. This car over here, the yellow and white convertible, the feature on that car, when you look at it, not only is it immaculately built, it's the tires. These were a one-year option that were offered by, I believe, B.F. Goodrich, but I'm not positive, where you could get colored tires for your car. So this car, if you look at it closely, it's got green tires on it that go very well with the interior. So the tires are green with white walls. This one here is my favorite. It's the cutaway car. Chevrolet actually did a cutaway car that year to demonstrate it. So John did a cutaway car. Very desirable. And this going to the museum. So I'd like to thank John for his contribution to the museum, and I think they're going to the right place. At least the state of New Jersey didn't get them. Thank you. Oh, one more thing. I forgot about this. 1987, George Barris held an auction at his North Hollywood shop to sell all of his models that he had collected over the years working for AMT. Prior to the auction, which was in the afternoon, he had a tag sale, for want of a better description. So I bought two of these, one of which I gave away many years ago, and this one. What you see on the cover is George Barris's signature. George and I were chatting very nicely because he and I graduated from the same high school, many, many years apart. But nonetheless, belonged to the same alumni association. Anyway, I've kept this for years, not knowing what to do with it. I talked to Mark here a while back, and I said, you know, I want it to go to the home. You want to raffle it? Auction it? Mark said, no, I want it to the museum. Whatever, it's got a home. Thank you.
Can I make a statement on that, the Roth auction? Rich Rothmill's the one who put together that to do the auction. He was supposed to get a percentage of what was actually sold. Barris's wife was putting money in her bra through the whole thing. He never got squat.
I had heard that.
John got a yellow submarine model that I bought for him there, though.
Buying stuff for me at that auction.
Was it for you?
Yeah. That
Oh,
was me.
sorry.
And both of them.
Let me just give, I neglected this earlier, but you notice in all the seminars at GSL now for a number of years, including recording my interview with Daryl Starbird 7 or 8, 9 years ago. Dave and Tony Hadley had been there running the equipment. I get into that stuff and it blows up. The great record we have over the last 3/4 dozen years, video records, is because of them. Because of me, certainly. And I want to tip of the hat to both of you. Not only you're working in the library, and boy, did they bring order out of chaos there recently, but it's also for the work you've done to chronicle these things for history, and thank you very much. Let's give them a hand. We're about out of our time here, but let's just have a couple of free moments here. What do you think, all things being equal, what do you think about the option of keeping the museum in private hands or sequestering it off to a sympathetic large automobile collection?
It all depends on whether you got somebody to pass the torch to. Here. I mean, financial, you've got one aspect, and then two is, it's kinda like the GSL.
Who can access it after it's donated to another facility? Can we access it?
You mean through the surgical website or something?
If this, the donation or the collection is donated to another entity, are we gonna be able to still go in there and look at the models and have magazines?
What Mark was talking about was the Smith Museum, which is in Lincoln, Nebraska. Yes, you can access that readily. If you have not seen that, you've not seen an auto museum. I was there probably 6, 7 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. That time they had just broken ground for about a 20,000 square foot. It's a 3-story building, it's a 20,000 square foot addition. Recently, they've broken ground for another 25,000 foot addition. It is the largest Ford flathead collection in the world of stock Ford flatheads, weird Ford flatheads, flathead speed equipment. There are land speed cars in there. As Mark said, the Starboard collection is now there.
Yep.
There are some really weird vehicles in there. There's a lunch pail collection there, I know.
Yeah.
Mrs. Smith was a taxi collector.
Yeah.
There is huge showcases full of all kinds of taxi stuff.
Right.
There's couple of dioramas there. It is a marvelous, marvelous place. I find the advantage to that place is that it's a tourist destination. Lincoln, Nebraska is in the middle of the world, but people go to Lincoln, Nebraska just to go to the Smith Museum. So yeah, can you go see that? You bet you can. I think it's about $15, but it's well worth it.
Tour. I came back through to LA for Father's Day.
Mark, do you have like a
Great,
template
great,
or
speak up.
do you have a template or a sample for somebody to add the museum to their will? Is there something they-
I have legal language, but the language differs. I've written, a friend of mine, as well as the states, has written some legal language, but it differs state to state.
But you have something available that we could?
Oh, sure.
give out? Okay,
Sure.
the other question would be, if it does go to a private, say, Smitty's, what happens to the donors? Does that stop?
That's, I think, something we'd have to work out with them.
I was involved in a local museum in the Portland area, auto museum, and it shut down because of COVID. Because with the shutdowns, the board of directors didn't feel it was feasible to keep it running for up to 2 years without anybody coming through the door. And this was on a level of the LeMay, the one in Lincoln, not as big, but and had a very educational side. And we were a registered nonprofit. The reason we couldn't continue is because we were months from being 5 years old and being able to apply for federal grants to keep it running. Where all the other crazy museums in the Portland area where I live, they could get this federal funding. You're asking about donors, and it's crazy. Our archives was probably fill a warehouse. We had pallets of magazines would line this wall. I mean, it had the point we couldn't take anymore. And what I'm getting to is nonprofit. People donate things. It doesn't go back to the person that donated. When a museum moves or whatever, the IRS gets involved, the feds. And all that down to the staplers had to be inventoried when they got moved to other museums. Took 9 months. And with that, we didn't own any cars. All the cars were on loan, some from the Miller collection here in Salt Lake. And so the cars were actually, any cars that we owned were owned by the directors, so they weren't involved. We're just talking about the display, graphics, models and stuff. And I had a couple of the local guys from our club, well, can I get my models back that I donated? No.
The IRS treats donations as final events. Unless you have initial document that says this is a loan for a specific period of
Yeah, you
time.
do a loan or donation, and under the forms. like I
They
was
have to
saying,
say
was
that.
indicated.
That's right. What's the consensus? Speak
It
freely.
would be easier available, readily available, people could see it, spread the word, get more people in. You know, oh, I built it as a kid, you can go to Lincoln, Nebraska now and see everything you did. Here, we see it every 2 years. Yes. Honestly, I would love to go someplace to be able to see it. I'm supposed to eat something.
Other opinions?
Explore the idea.
Hey, Mark,
We'll do so, yes.
So maybe it's not all or nothing, okay, because a lot of what you have, it's very interesting to model geeks, is, you know, a Monty display thing from 1963, you know, and the average guy is gonna look at that and he's not gonna register as what that is or why it's important. So if you worked out an arrangement with somebody like that Speed Museum, and you select stuff that is very attractive to the average person and motivates them to understand more about models, but isn't absolutely everything we all love about this, maybe there's a sort of a split that makes sense. And
What would happen to the stuff that isn't donated?
you would pare back down to a smaller space, you know, but yeah, I think that's one thought, you know, you could like split some of it out. You know? You've got a lot of models like those down there, they're very interesting, but they're not the ones that are, you know, like name things that have recognition, and that's what the guy's got, has in his museum now. You know, stuff that people see that and they go, oh, this car ran in Bonneville in whatever year, or this is a notable flathead. And we have the same thing about models, but, you know, it's tiered. And you and the rest of us are into a lot of goofy stuff that is, you know, good fodder for model geeks, but maybe it's not something the museum would be all over, but maybe there's a cut of it that is. And it's not 90%, maybe it's only 10 or 30, or I don't know what, you know, but that might be something worth discussing with them.
Okay.
Mark?
Or you rotate.
Can you loan the collection to the Clay Smith
Yeah.
Museum? And I say that because in Philadelphia, the Simeon collection is taking a slightly different tack since Fred Simeon died. Clay Smith could pass away, and that collection could, you know, something could change. Suppose they don't want it anymore, could you get it back?
Well, the donation currently isn't owned by an individual, it's owned by a legal entity. And Clay Smith is, I don't know all that much about their internal legal organization, but he is the CEO, he's the CEO, and I don't think he owns the equity in it. That's an assumption.
I'm just saying, suppose they don't want it, if it's on loan, you can get it back.
Sons are running the business.
It's something we're looking into,
Mother and
I agree.
father passed.
Well, and
If you dissolve the museum, who's it gonna come back to?
it just seems like there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, you know, you don't have to just, don't whole hog into any one of them. The rotation idea is one thing, you know, one way to get the whole interest thing to be verified with the museum to say, okay, you guys don't get a space here and we're gonna put artifacts in there, modern car related, and let's see how your visitors like that. And if it goes over big, then maybe they wanna have more, and then maybe you work out a rotation and you change all of that stuff out every 2 years or whatever else, you know.
Yeah, but then where do you store the ones you aren't putting out?
Yeah, well.
Any other comments?
The gentleman alluded to the fact that many people see this, won't see the significance of it because it's not something that was a land speed record holder or something like that. That's not what this museum, or our museum, is about. Our museum is about significant cars, significant models that are significant to our interest. the history of our modeling, the cars that are unique, whether these are of interest to guys that are interested in Ford flatheads or guys that are interested in starboard cars, I don't see that as a significant problem. Because the people that are going to look at this and see this are far more of the general public than see it now. But that, I think, is a big advantage. Like I said, it's a tourist destination. So the people that see it there, the people that are going to enjoy it there, are not necessarily the people that enjoy seeing Ford flatheads or starboard cars or land speed cars. They're people that are interested in models, and they will see the significance of it. That's the whole point of having a museum in the first place. Not everything, you go to an art museum, not everything attracts your eye. Some of the stuff you just walk by and say, that's terrible, keep going. So I think every museum that is well attended has the same thing. It's trying to attract interest in something in anybody that comes through there. So I'm not saying that what you're saying is unfounded. I just don't think it is a significant drawback to having it as part of the Smith Museum.
There's something for everybody in Speedy Bill's museum. He's got tether cars, he's got quarter midgets, he's got she has lots of small scale taxi cabs, carousels, you name it, there's stuff there that goes to everybody, not just one type of car or one type of flathead. There's engines in their room that you can see that I've never seen. When's the last time you saw a flat 4 Chevrolet made out of a V8 where they cut it down the middle and pancaked it for a midget? There's just all kinds of stuff like that everywhere in that place.
Can I make this suggestion? I'm hearing you, but I think procedurally, if we were to turn things over right now to Smith Museum, pursuant to a reasonable agreement, they're not going to know 0.1% of the significance of what's in the collection because they don't have any background. The average person probably can't. I think someone said locally, may have been Dave Hadley, may have said locally, but in some sense, if I were Elon Musk, if I were an Elon Musk aid creature, you want to put a plug in the back of my head and download. I need to get out of my head and onto paper, at least on some record, what I know, so that the institutional memory that I have isn't lost. If I drive home after GSL and it's, God forbid, that stuff's gone. I'm not trying to overemphasize my importance, because I don't believe that, but there are things I know that ought to be on paper, I mean by that electronically, that need to be recognized so that those bits of information from me and from a lot of others survive. Because right now they can't survive if they exist only, in the biochemical soup of a brain. That's not enough. There's going to be much more than that. So I want to propose that some part of the donations we get, say from the auction tomorrow or Saturday, and maybe some additional monies are used to get the right kind of situation. I don't know what that means, the right people involved, get the scanning done, to have interviews, so that information can be saved, that documents can be created, photographs linked to text, so that this information isn't lost. Because right now, if key people are gone, that stuff's gone. And there are no two ways around that. And that, again, I'm not trying to paint myself in some special position, because I don't believe that. But there are things I know that I shouldn't only know.
Start writing.
Well, it's kind of like what Steven Spielberg has done with Holocaust survivors. Gone and interviewed them and videoed them and chronicled what they went through, so that that's not forgotten.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The Shoah project, I think they call it.
Any other thoughts, my friends? Yeah, we're at 5 o'clock. I think it's about time for break. But again, you know my email address. It's everywhere in the documents downstairs. Send me your opinion. Be candid. You can't hurt my feelings. Not after being an attorney for almost 50 years, you can't hurt my feelings. So send me your notes, send me your critiques, send me your suggestions. Be candid, as many of you have been in this room, and that's all good. I welcome those opinions.
That's what I meant.
So thank you for being here.
The museum,